be with me as I do the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, the way Jesus spoke it over 2,000 years ago. Awun dwashmaya nathqaddash shmach تأثي ملكوتاخ نهوي صوينخ إكنا دوشمية أبر حولا لحمة سنكانا يومنا واشوقلان حوبين إكنا دابحنا شوقن لحيوين لا تعلن لأنسيونا إلا بصا من بيشة مثل دي لاخي ملكوثة حي لو تشبحته العالم عالمين آمين. Well, before I dive into today's talk, I wanted to remind everybody that this coming Saturday, Dr. Eriko is doing the Noohra School of Light, session number 3 on the Gospel of St. John. If you're interested, please contact the foundation if you haven't already to register. The class does have a fee, but we're always for people who need help and so forth. Lynn can always work with you on that. So that's our announcement. Plus, Dr. Eriko mentioned last time that he and I are going to be doing the joint sessions on regular basis, probably once a month. We haven't decided if we're going to like insert it at the, like next week or just do it the last Wednesday of the month. We'll see what works best and we'll keep you posted. So with that said, I want to dive right in. So where we've been, in case you haven't been with us before, or I've jumped in recently and started talking about Jesus's ministry as it's morphing. So if you look at the way the gospel according to St. Matthew or Mark and Luke, the synoptic gospels, they're called synoptic, by the way. I use sometimes I assume everybody knows, but it's because if you put them side by side, they basically validate each other and they are they're more focused on Jesus. As you leave those 3 books, the first 3 books in what we call the New Testament, and go to the Gospel of John, you're starting to get into theology, into an explanation for the early Christians of what Jesus of Nazareth represented, and that's where it dives into the Christ, the Mashiach concept, which is the anointed state of a human being, Jesus, the man who we read about in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, how they were starting to see his influence and his bigger mission of bringing peace and creating not a new religion, but a new movement. And I think if you have the time and the resources and interest, joining Dr. Eriko on Saturday continues to open up the Gospel of John and talking about the Messiah state of Jesus and how the early followers were now building on what he had taught them when he was with them and alive with them. And now that he's with them in spirit, what that meant for them to kind of move forward and build this big movement that became Christianity. But as I said, he had no intent to start a new religion. He was a Galilean Jew who studied the prophets and studied the law of Moses and studied what we call the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, and he took the best of it and added his own little spices to that recipe and came up with the message of the kingdom. Even though the John the Baptist or the baptizer was started the ministry right before Jesus appeared on the scene, and he was preaching the message of the kingdom, the nuance between the 2 messages was where Jesus elevated it and brought it and made it actually accessible is where the power of Jesus, and that's why his movement became this massive movement. And most likely, as we talked about when Dr. Errico and I did the session a couple of weeks ago, how he and as he was communicating with John, was explaining that John came to basically set the path for him, and he came and took it to the next level. And we'll get into some of that. So as Jesus declared himself, I would call that like phase one of his ministry. He first showed up and started teaching and started sharing and started explaining things. And then slowly, as people started getting attracted to him and he became recognized, he started recruiting the early followers that became the early church. And we call them the apostles, the first hand-selected few. And then there were the apostles and the disciples and the early followers. So the movement grew, and it wasn't a membership. It wasn't like you joined and he gave you a card and it had an expiration date or anything like that. But those were people he knew he needed to be vested in. They were the closest to him. They spent almost every minute of their life with him. Now as he demonstrated to them. So initially his teaching was by demonstration and answering their questions and spreading the word. So he took it upon himself to also do his ministry while they're joining him. And now that he felt they're ready enough, they were young, they were inexperienced. A lot of them were illiterate. Most of them were illiterate. They were fishermen. They were what we would call today simple people. But that was by design, because he wanted people he didn't have to sit with them and spend hours arguing theology and books and so forth and philosophies. He knew that the kingdom, for it to be accessible and the explanation, he needed people to actually simplify, not complicate. The exact opposite of what we think of today as religion. As you can see behind me, there is a library, and there are more books in what the room that I actually call a library. And a lot of it is nitpicking at every word and every concept and comparing religions and comparing gospels and so forth. So we've complicated something that was meant to be simple. So as he brought the simple message, even the name of the Aramaic Bible is the Peshitta, the simple, which means exactly in Aramaic, it means the simple. Which, I mean, to think about what we've done to it in over 2,000 years and how we have schools of theology and PhDs and so forth, it's great because it continued to move keep Christianity on our minds and in existence. But it lost, in many ways, it's lost its path. And we often get questions about, my church believes this way. Have you heard of this church? And there are a lot of them. I would say every church at its core has some goodness in it. And especially at the stage where its founders came together and found even an easier way or a better way to communicate based on how they grew up in their churches. But eventually, all of them end up complicating. And there is a pressure to continue to create and bring in new content to the church. So sometimes they even lose their ways because of their openness. Not that it's bad to be open, being open and accepting of other concepts and so forth, but they sometimes lose their way of this core goodness that Jesus brought in, because there are other concepts that come in, and then you start talking about and debating reincarnation in a church, or the blood of Jesus, or handling snakes, or the Apostle Paul plays a huge role in traditional Christianity. So Jesus, as he recruited and educated and trained his apostles, the last few weeks I talked about how he started sending them on missions, and sometimes they succeeded and sometimes they came back frustrated, and he got frustrated with them as well. And now he's also turned some of his attention, and maybe the early movement turned its attention as John the Baptist was captured and in jail. Eventually, he's going to get killed. He also had some, and at the beginning of a movement, and he had followers who would go and spend time with him and study under him, and then go back to their villages and their towns and share that message. So the John movement was spreading enough that Jesus and his early followers, and it continues in even the first chapter of the Gospel of John. You'll notice that there is what we call the cosmic messenger, the word that was the Milta, and you'll see that even there the scribes interrupted that and put some gave John some accolades and to tell his followers, hey, yes, he has value and he's maybe a part of this bigger movement, but Jesus is the movement, and Jesus's teachings is the movement. So now that he's starting to recruit from John's group, we continue with, and now he's been around. So he's been to Capernaum. He's been to the area, all the villages and the towns around the Sea of Galilee. He's been to Nazareth. So people are aware of him. And in this stage of his ministry, and I don't know how scholars feel about that, but I think in this stage of ministry, he started doing something different. He started talking to them about, hey, you've had these teachings, and you've had a chance to start practicing them and making shifts with the way you do things. And he starts warning them that if you do not take this into your core daily behavior and their daily lives, it's going to backfire on you. And remember, we're talking about Galilee, northern Palestine, northern Israel, and these villages were constantly in struggle with Jerusalem on a religious basis, or on religious basis, and with the Roman occupation regularly. They did not want to be under occupation. So continuing from where we left off a couple of weeks ago. Okay, and the last thing I think Dr. Eriko and I covered, I believe, was and blessed is he who does not stumble on account of me. So he's still talking about how his teachings are supposed to bring in peace and love and a happy life. And if you follow the teachings of Jesus, you might suffer a little bit because people might be mean to you or not get what you're doing. But you're not going to be a miserable person. You're going to be a happy, content person. And as you run into challenges, you will be comforted. And typically, if you belong to a community of believers, also they will bring in that to you. So the teachings of Jesus, the guarantee of Jesus's way of living is that you will have a good life. You will have a life that you have no struggle with the decisions and the actions that you take. So that's why he says, on account of my teachings, you will be blessed. You will be delighted. You will live a happy, good life. Now he does that, and when they went away, the people he was talking to, he began to speak to the people concerning John, and this is important because he's creating an interesting comparison and kind of like now challenge. Okay, John the Baptist is in jail. What did you go out to the wilderness to see? A reed which is shaken by the wind? If not so, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? Behold, those who wear fine clothes are in kings' houses and palaces. And if not so, what then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and much more than a prophet. So do you see, he's reminding them, when you came seeking, and when you went Now John is in jail, right? So this is a lost group of people who are struggling. These are the students of John, or the apostles of John. Um, and he's reminding them that you did not go out to go to the establishment, right? So he's saying that you went out to find a man who's speaking about the kingdom, a prophet who's telling you what's going to come. A prophet is somebody who wakes the community up and gives them the news and sometimes warnings about how their behavior might lead to bad outcomes, and how if they don't change their behavior soon, that outcome is going to manifest itself. Versus if you do change your behavior, most likely things will turn out okay and you will have a good life. So Jesus is talking about that as a prophet. And he's saying you're not going to the establishment. Okay. So the people with fine clothes, people who are focused on material things, are in king's houses. They work for the government. They are the advisors of the king, or the protectors of the king. Those are the upper, what we call an upper crust, or the upper part of society. So Jesus was very clear. It's like you've come seeking John. Okay, he's talking to his disciples. Okay, a prophet. So, and if not so, then did you go out to see a prophet? Yes, I tell you, and much more than a prophet. For this is he of whom it is written, behold, I send my messenger before your face to prepare the way before you. So he's quoting the prophets about how somebody is going to come before the Messiah, before that the person they're expecting, to make way for him. So he's now, though he doesn't say I am the Messiah, he's basically in between. If you read between the lines, that's what he's saying. Truly I say to you that among those who are born of women, there has never risen one greater than John the Baptist. And yet even the least person in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. So this verse 11 in chapter 11, I'm going to read it again. Truly I say to you that among those who are born of women, and this is just an Aramaic way of speaking. That theology uses some of this to say that he was not born of a woman, that he was special. Jesus is. Okay, but what he's saying, this is just an Aramaic way of speaking, honoring John, saying as far as human beings, people, because everybody's born of a woman, he is a special guy. But even as special as he is, people who choose to follow my teachings, Jesus's teachings, and enter the kingdom of heaven, the least of them is better than John. So think about that. So because that's how he's contrasting and showing them that his teachings are above John's. That John had really good stuff, but he was just preparing the way. And now that Jesus is here and he's teaching his teachings, that's the true way. Okay, that's the path. Now remember, he's also talking that way because he wants them to say, oh, okay, we'll join you. Okay, because that's how the movement is going to grow and spread. It's a takeover almost in today's language. So even the least person in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. That's John. For the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has been administered by force, and only those in power control it. So to see why? Because up to the moment of Jesus coming, and John, because John went after the establishment. He spoke against the king. He spoke against the central authority in Jerusalem. He did not like that how they were working together. And that's what ended up sending him to jail. And that's what ended up costing him his head when they finally killed him. So, but he's saying that kingdom, because John spoke against the Romans, against the occupation, against the control. And Jesus shifted all of that. He did not speak against it the same way John did. He put the burden on the people's behavior to change, and through love and loving your enemy and doing all the things that he talked about, compassion, taking care of one another. And that's how he was changing this system of power and force. Okay, so Jesus speaks against the method of force. And if you think about how the Christianity, when it was adopted by the Roman Empire early on, and by the Emperor Constantine, they turned into he turned it into an empire's religion. And that empire's religion went after the pagans, who were the same people. Like overnight, imagine if you were persecuting Christians and going to the temple of Zeus or whatever pagan god you're praying for. And I mean, this is kind of, and then your emperor one day tells you, oh, by the way, all that is going away. That's the wrong path. And as of tomorrow morning, or as of 6 o'clock tonight, we are all going to become Christians. And anybody who's not, I'm going to chop their head off. That's drastic. We just saw that the president of Venezuela, I think, declared that October 1st will be Christmas. Same mindset of somebody in power. So that this is what happened to Christianity as the empire took it. And then it became a religion of force. Then that's the church later started aligning with kings and using their armies to conquer pagan nations. That's why we have the Crusaders. That's why to this day we have a lot of the military and the church go hand in hand. Every one of our schools of military, I've been to Annapolis, and I went to the chapel. So that the chapel and the military are joined today. Not Jesus. Jesus said, up to this moment, through the time of John, until I showed up, the kingdom of God was controlled by force, was administered by force. So that's his, then also picking at the temple authority, who shook hands with the king and with the Roman power to control the Jewish people and the people in Galilee and other places that went under their control from a religious perspective. So now you see how Jesus is contrasting himself, slowly distancing himself from John's way of managing to reestablish the concept of the kingdom of heaven or kingdom of God that he was introducing. So only those in power control it, okay, administered by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John. And if you wish to accept it, he is Elijah who was to come. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. But to whom shall I liken this generation? It is like boys who sit in the street and call to their friends. So now he's again saying, what did you expect when you go to the desert? You got a prophet. And then he goes through that. Now he's telling them, now he's turning on them, okay? And wanting to say, and say, so these are like the children, and say, when we have sung to you, but you did not dance. We have sung to you, but you did not dance. And we have wailed to you, but you did not mourn. For John came neither eating, not drinking, and they said, he is crazy. He is crazy. The Son of Man, now he's talking about himself, this human being came eating and drinking, and they said, behold, a glutton and a winebibber, and a friend of tax collectors and sinners. And yet wisdom is justified by its works. So John came in a typical prophet style, ate from the wilderness, and had a very simple life. Jesus came from the mainstream, from not from the upper crust, but from the mainstream, from the majority of the people. And he always wanted to affiliate with the majority of the people. But even his behavior, because he was your typical rabbi of the people, teacher of the people. And he hung out with them, and he sat, and he knew that the tax collectors were hurting because their jobs, their careers were very stressful, and they were disliked by their society. And he had wine with the people when he sat and had dinner with them. So they turned on him. So he's going like, what do you want? You had this prophet living a prophet style of lifestyle, and you did not like that. And now that you have somebody who's just hanging out with you and being like everybody else, normal dude just drinking wine and hanging out and having dinner, you did not like that, and you called him a wine bibber. We hear that a lot in churches, these words. But they're powerful in that he's saying, I'm just one of you. I'm just one of you. And then he says, and the King James has this, because it's translated directly from Aramaic. The Aramaic word that's used it means the children, not works. So I don't think I have the King James open, but if you read this in the King James, the last sentence in verse 19, and yet wisdom is justified by her children, is how the King James read. But thank goodness that Dr. Lamza comes from the culture, and that the wisdom is, he says, is justified by its works. So, and in Aramaic, the word with the root is very rich as far as how you can translate it. But you can tell the people who translate it from Latin and Greek into the King James used it literally, versus somebody from the culture understanding that what Jesus was saying is that what I'm teaching you, when you execute that, when you go live by it, people will know you by your works. That's probably the only, I remember I mentioned the membership cards when he was recruiting people, and they wanted membership cards. His apostles were constantly, and their families were constantly going like, I'm member number one, I'm member number two. I want to sit on your left side. I want to sit on your right side. I want to be your advisor. I want to lead the military. I want to lead the economy and so forth, right? They're thinking we're going to revolt. And he's telling them here that the only way, when you become a citizen of the kingdom, the only way people will know you is by your works. Okay, so wisdom is known by its works. So that's how and I've answered a lot of questions about that in the past. How do I know that I'm doing the right thing, or how should I behave? It's the results, the results, the results. So Jesus is first the results in your life, your happiness, your contentment, your joy, and your influence, your light. And then you see those ripple effects. Once you start living that life, that's the ripple effects become more joy, more happiness, more compassion. Because he talks here, because he makes the example of these children who constantly complaining. If we sang to you, you didn't dance. So he's saying, we're coming with some good stuff. You need to engage. Okay, and remember, this is the next stage. He's already talked to them many times. They've already seen his good works. So now he's going like, what else do you want to wake up and join the kingdom? I don't think I'm going to cover everything I was planning to cover. Then Jesus began to reproach the cities in which his many works were done, and which did not repent. So they did not turn to God. Repent. Dr. Erko did some really great sessions on repentance the last 4 or 5 weeks. And so he feels like he's frustrated because now he's coming back to these places and he's going like, okay, how's the community? Same old problems. What are you preaching in your synagogues? Same old messages. How are you feeling about the Romans? Same thing. How are you feeling about your other neighbors? Same thing. He's going, what is going on? Why won't you wake up? And he said, woe to you, Chorazin. or Chorazin. Woe to you, Bethsaida, for if Tyre and Sidon had been done the works, see the works which were done in you, they might have repented in sackcloth and ashes. So he's taking Jewish towns or towns that had big Jewish populations and comparing them to pagan towns like Tyre and Sidon at the time probably was Phoenicia, but today's Lebanon. He was saying that even pagan people, if they had the kind of healings and teachings that you've received, they would be like practically mourning and beating themselves up for not knowing that earlier and not living by it. They would have taken it in, even the pagans. Here you have the history of the Torah, you have the rabbis, you have the synagogues, and you know what I'm talking about, and you have not changed. You have not turned to God. You're still living the same way. See, that's why I'm saying this is the next stage of his ministry. He's now going and saying, you're going to run out of time. Back every Wednesday or every Saturday or whatever, Sunday, and talk about these, listen to these things. We're not going to experience the change. We need to trust. We need to dive in and start living this life, and that's key to the kingdom. Just 1 second. Okay. So continuing here, but I say to you, it will be easier for Tyre and Sidon in the days of judgment than for you. And you, Capernaum, which has exalted yourself up to heaven, shall be brought down to Sheol, for if in Sodom had been done the works which were done in you, it would be standing to this day. So remember, Sodom and Gomorrah are the towns that were destroyed because the people were so bad. And I know that Dr. Erko has a great book about Sodom and Gomorrah that explains why those communities were so bad. They were so full of themselves. They were so against anything from the outside. They had riches, they had power, and that was their sin. Their sin is they were never humble. They were never good to people who needed help. And eventually, when the cities were destroyed by nature, it was basically used in the Bible to tell that to say, if you live badly, that nobody's going to care about you, nobody's going to help you, nobody's going to save you, and you will be destroyed. So he's saying that Tyre and Sidon, the pagan cities, have a better chance than these cities like Capernaum and Chorazin and Bethsaida, those towns around the Sea of Galilee that he constantly went around and sent his apostles to teach them about the kingdom, that they need to change their ways or their current ways are going to destroy them. And just for the heck of it, I was going through my family photos, and I'll share something with you. So bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to share photos I scanned earlier this year, I believe. These are my grandparents on their honeymoon on my mom's side. They were born in Gaza, and in 1941 on their honeymoon, they went to the temple that was destroyed in Capernaum. And you see a British soldier, I don't know if he was an officer, because at the time that area, Capernaum, northern Palestine, was under British mandate. So they chose, and my grandfather has some words saying how he stood there, and the rocks there, they have like if you knock on them, they make different sounds, different hollow sounds. I've never been, but this is the temple that probably it or some version of it was visited by Jesus, and he spoke there. Let me see if I can get you. And this is also in Capernaum. So these biblical cities, when I read in the Bible, they're not just some faraway place. These are again my grandparents at I think it's an oil press, or maybe it's for grinding wheat. I think it's for oil. And my grandfather wrote that slaves used to run this in the Roman times to grind grain or press oil. And one last one, this is my grandmother at the Sea of Galilee, so in Tiberias. So so when I'm talking to you about these things, I'm not talking from some just biblical perspective. These are personal stories. These places are in my blood and my history. And to see that these temples were destroyed and we know why, because they did not pick up the kingdom. They did not take compassion and love, and they continued to resist, and they continued to live with the old ways. And luckily, the apostles and disciples of Jesus did take that to heart, and they went and spread the message of love, and the movement did flourish, even though initially, or soon after Jesus' death, the actual physical place died. And Jesus knew that. That's one of the main reasons why he said, I will not have a headquarters. That you are the temple. Each one of us is the temple of God. God lives because we bring God into existence through our behavior, through our works. So it's so powerful. And when you look at the photos I showed you with the temple being just nothing but rubble, it's because the people who went to that temple did not listen to Jesus as he was warning them, as we're reading now, to change their behavior so they can have a much better, a much happier life. That temple would have been standing today, and maybe not with all the other wars that happened, but that shift, if it would have started happening back then and continued without being co-opted and corrupted through history, that the movement, who knows? We would have global peace. We would have abundance. And I believe it's never too late, because the good works that we do today are the reason why life on earth is still good, and we still have a lot of joy and a lot of pleasure to enjoy while we are on this journey. I'm not getting any questions, so I'll keep talking until I start seeing some questions popping in. Okay, so he condemned Capernaum, and he talked about Sodom and Gomorrah. At that time, Jesus answered, saying, I thank thee, O my Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because thou hast hidden these things from the wise and the men of understanding, and hast revealed them to children. Oh yes, my Father, for such was thy will. See, so almost like the same language that he, in a way, he uses in the Lord's Prayer, what we call the Lord's Prayer. So he re-emphasizes, he tells these people who are listening to him that the people who are splitting hairs at the temple and the temple yard, and people who are sitting in the upper rooms of the castles, debating policy and debating invasions and military and so forth. And a lot of them, as we know, that they were also throwing big parties and getting drunk and murdering some, sometimes their brothers, sometimes their leader of the army, like David did. So people, when they get involved in the other system and the worldly system, that's not what Jesus was going after. That system fails. It never fulfills us, and it just brings in more trouble. What Jesus was talking about is we need the simplicity. Thank you. He talks again. God is the Father. God is a father figure for him, and he thanks him for opening the eyes and hearts of people, simple people who are around him. So he still has hope that the people of these towns will join. And a lot of them did. And a lot of them survived that slaughter that took place by the Romans. And those were that was the early movement that spread. Everything has been delivered to me by my Father, and no man knows the Son except the Father, nor does any man know the Father but the Son, and he to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. So, so again, that hidayah, that what we call the firstborn, not the only born, has that ability to bring in the knowledge that only the Father has, and that the Son grabs it and it becomes his. And we can say son, it's child, we can say parent, but that knowledge, we have it a lot in our tradition, but we don't think of it that way. We talk about grandma's recipe book. We talk about grandmother's, being a part of the suffrage, and speaking against inequality and so forth. We have it constantly. Our parents and our grandparents pass that knowledge, and typically the eldest in the household is the one who has a completely different view than the rest of the kids. And in Aramaic culture, in Galilean culture, in Jewish culture, today in Arab countries, in Levantine culture where I grew up, that bond between the firstborn, especially son, this is strictly cultural, and the father is so strong because the father thinks of the son as a copy of him, a copy. And that copy takes on all the goodness that the father has. And then in the case of Jesus, he was using that example to show us how he can now bring us that knowledge. And unlike sons traditionally, who would keep the secret of the family, who would keep the trade secrets if they have a business or something like that, he said, I open it up. I tell you how God wants us to live. Okay, I know it, I studied it, I listened, and now I am sharing it all with you. Come to me, all you who labor and carry burdens, and this is great, and I will give you rest. Okay, so if you're tired, come, I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and meek in my heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is pleasant and my burden is light. So this is the end of what we call chapter 11. So that again, he tells us about his teachings. It seems difficult. It seems so difficult to love your enemy. It seems so difficult to bless the ones who curse you. It seems so difficult to be the mourner who's being told you will be comforted. It seems so difficult to be the meek or the peacemakers. Can you imagine? I consider myself a peacemaker. I cried today watching the news about a 7-year-old who lost her life in a bombing. Not because I have hate in my heart, because I have compassion for every life. Whenever I see that, we all of us peacemakers, all of us peace lovers, need to rise and speak the truth about what's going on. That's the works that we do. This is part of my ministry. My ministry here is to share with you Jesus's teachings, and then tell you that 2,000 years later, we're not just reading a history book. We're not reading some old teaching. This is living. These lessons that we go through from Jesus are living lessons, are lessons for us today, and they help us. But I know that I'm delighted because Jesus tells me, blessed are, or delighted are the peacemakers, because they will be known as children of God, or they will, the meek will inherit the earth. Because by staying away from the conflict and not fearing death and fearing the ones who destroy the souls. So what does he do? He said, I will, my burden, that the teachings that I give you is so light. It's not like religious teachings that constantly put you down and put a yoke on your shoulders, and you leave church feeling really bad. because they tell you that you've been bad. Most churches do that. But the true teachings of Jesus, they live that. And you will wear his teachings almost as an honor, not as something that is heavy. You will find rest for your souls. So I'm still seeing no questions. We're at 15 minutes. I'll just keep going. So I'm jumping into the next chapter. At that time, Jesus walked on the Sabbath. Okay, so now we're shifting at the tone. I can see why they broke the chapters, though these were not written in chapters. So he's walking on the Sabbath, and we've talked. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we talked about it a lot. At that time, Jesus walked on the Sabbath through the wheat fields, and his disciples became hungry. So this is the Sabbath. And they began to pluck ears of grain and to eat. So if you're Jewish, and on the Sabbath, you should have plucked your wheat and put it on a plate and had it sitting waiting for you. You couldn't even get the plate moved probably from that's religion. See, this is religion, is that they told them you can. And there were monitors. There were people sitting there monitoring you to see what you're doing. So here's Jesus with these young men walking through a wheat field, and they got hungry, and so they start plucking wheat and eating. But when the Pharisees, see them, I said they have monitors, saw them, they said to him, "Behold, your disciples are doing what is unlawful to do on the Sabbath." See, so they're hey, we're here to enforce God's will. That God doesn't. When God the Father sees us hungry, he wants us to eat. He doesn't want somebody to tell us which day of the week we can eat or not, or how to eat. But he said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he and those who were with him were hungry? How he entered into the house of God and did eat bread that was on the table of the Lord, that which was not lawful for him to eat, not any day, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests." See, these are rules. So the Jewish people had a rule where you made this special bread and you took it to the temple, and then they put it behind the curtain, and it was holy bread that's only basically for the priests to eat on behalf of God. So they created this religious structure. And yet when David was hungry, and David was a Mashiach, he was an anointed one, he was a Messiah as well, and he broke that law. So he's arguing with them from their own books. They say, okay, I'm going to use Moses to hit you on the head, and he said, okay, I will use the David story in Kings to hit you on the head. So he was very learned, and he was very quick. He could process that. Or have you not read in the book of law that the priests in the temple disregard the Sabbath and yet are blameless? But I say to you that there is one here who is greater than the temple. But if you only knew what it means, I want mercy and not sacrifice, you should not condemn those who are blameless. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And Jesus departed from thence and came to their synagogue. So they caught him eating as they're walking, and I just showed you pictures of Capernaum, especially with the press, how it has like trees and stuff. So they were walking in these fields, and they're eating, and these guys were watching with, they're like spies monitoring them, and they saw them eat, and they had this argument with Jesus. And Jesus is constantly, now here he is telling them that if you just get what I'm telling you, okay, again, he's still warning them to change your ways. And they're still. So he went into their synagogue. I will stop here. I see a couple of questions coming in here. So we'll continue with this in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, let me see the questions. can you explain what the yoke is? A yoke is basically the thing, the device they put around the animal's neck and tie basically the rope for them to like go around the mill, or to put maybe the implements are escaping me. So the yoke is that heavy, usually wooden structure that they would put on an animal, a farm animal, typically like a big ox or a bull or a cow, to plow, so the plow or something like that. So that's what the yoke is. And people use it metaphorically here, that if you are doing the work, then there is a yoke. So each one of us metaphorically has a yoke around their if you'd call me, accountant two in my business, that's my yoke. And if accountant two is very hard work, that yoke is going to weigh on me. And like I'm being the animal that's being used to plow the land, or work the press or the well or whatever. So Jesus here is saying that that religion's yoke and society's yoke is very heavy. It's a burden, but my yoke is very light. So when you put Jesus's teachings on you, and that's what guides you, and that's what drives you, and that's what your works are a result of, then you'll see how light that is, how you're at the end of the day, when you go sit, you're not tired. When you go through your day of the things you've done and the things you've said and the people you've helped and the people you've blessed and so forth, that lifts you up. Doesn't feel like that animal that at the end of the day, when you take that yoke off, they're carrying these many pounds and working all day. And that's what religion feels like. That's why a lot of us have trouble around different topics: sexuality, equality, racism, war. Okay, because religion doesn't help us answer those questions. Jesus had the answer, and his answer was very light and very freeing. Great question. Okay, so there are many beautiful affirmations of our relationship with God in Psalms. How do you say, "The Lord is my rock and my salvation, the Lord is my light" in Aramaic? I'll have to write it down and share it with you next time, but I'll keep the question. So, Rabbi Yoran, do you know how to do it offhand, or we'll just wait? How do we keep peace in our hearts when we have people coming across the border that are destroying property and hurting people? I would say the same way you would keep peace in your heart when people who are in your community doing the bad things that they do. So I know that in our country today, in the United States, the immigration issue and people coming through the border legally or illegally is a big flashpoint, especially if you follow politics. The reality of this country is that we've always had people come across the borders. Actually, a lot of our country is land taken from some of these countries that are now sending us people. So the connection between the people and the land is bigger than the border and the new borders. So that's one thing. So the concept of border is where you probably should start. The person who asked the question, or any one of us, is like, we take things for granted. So that's one point. Now, are they truly coming? All of them, most of them, some of them have, like any other community, like any other society, have a lot of good people and a few bad people who sneak in. And when those people do bad, I would say treat it the same way you would treat it if your community has a member of it who's probably grandparents born in your community and they do something bad. You have to have compassion, you have to have law, You have to have the community caring for itself, and also looking in the mirror of what we could have done better to raise that person to, in a better way, to give them better opportunity, to better education, better whatever. Okay, so the burden, and this is, I'm using Jesus because that's my guide. That the compassion that he's talking about, that the love that he's talking about has no borders. And remember, he was under occupation. He wasn't just in a good country like ours with abundance and law and a lot of good people and good opportunities. He was in an occupied time where the empire was putting their thumb on them in Galilee and all over. The Romans were ruthless and killed a lot of people and crucified a lot of people. He wasn't the only person crucified. They crucified many, many hundreds, actually thousands and thousands of people. So the way I would see that the immigrant who's coming to find opportunity, just like me, I am an immigrant. And yes, some people remind me I'm a good immigrant because I came in legally and stamped a fiancé visa and worked hard and got a job and built a life here. But a lot of immigrants that came in, our great grandparents, and I know a lot of examples of people who came in just a couple nights ago. I was watching, actually last night I was watching Finding Your Roots on PBS, and they were telling one of our celebrities how his great grandfather or great grandfather was a slave owner. Okay, so when we look, and he's a lovely person, makes great movies, and just a good guy overall. But if we rewind 150 years or 100 years, we can see and look at that slice of how society was. If we ask the same question then, these are people who were born here and had all the opportunity in the world, but they were ruthless and they were bad people in today's standards. In their standards, they might have been liked by some of the society and hated by another side of the society. So just keep the Jesus glasses on and evaluate, am I grouping these people? And grouping is very risky, because remember, this message, and if you're new with us, I'm re-emphasizing, this message is personal. Each one of us is a beautiful child of God. We're born that way. Then we are trained some other way through society. And what Jesus wanted us to do is to remember that we are that beautiful child of God, and that the Father loves us and takes good care of us and gives us a lot of brothers and sisters to help us in our journey. So look at the immigrants that way. Don't look at them as this grouping of people that's coming across. And do your research. That's the other thing that I, headlines sometimes grab us, and we're lazy, and I'm lazy. So I can say we're lazy because I'm lazy, and it takes me an effort to go and hear something and then do the research and discover, like in the case of immigrants, killing and raping and so forth, that's being said, that the overall statistics actually support, and you can verify me and send me a link if I'm wrong, that the percentages of bad people who are immigrating illegally even into the country to our crime rate without the immigrants being here is close, or actually our numbers are higher typically. The bulk of these people are running away from bad situations, and they're just trying to find a peaceful life to build on, like our grandparents did, like I did when I came here. So with that, I think we are on time. Don't forget, in case you joined us late, Dr. Erico is doing the third session on the Gospel of John and the Messiah. So if you have not registered, please contact the foundation. As I said earlier, there is a fee with that registration. So talk with Lynn if you have financial issues, and we'd love to see you on Saturday. And next week will be Dr. Erico. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your questions. Until next time, God bless you.